Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and I am joined once again by the leader of the Libertarian Party of Canada, Tim Moen. First of all, thank you for joining us again.
Hey guys, yeah, thanks for having me, Josh. Always a pleasure to be on World Alternative Media.
Absolutely. Well, first question, Tim. Were you able to stomach the recent debates, and what did the debates tell you about the state of Canadian politics? If you did indeed watch them, I don't know. I couldn't watch them myself. I just go crazy.
You know, I turned them on, and yeah, I could stomach about 5 minutes, and it turned me off. Now I kept the debates on in the background. I was helping my daughter with her homework, and I caught a few moments of the debate, but by and large, it is. Yeah, I mean, it is a perfect example of where we're at in society today, right? It's basically virtue signaling. You know, people, whoever you were cheering for going into the debate won the debate. This is simply a participation in tribalism and virtue signaling to your tribe. And everyone walked away thinking that their guy or their gal kicked butt in that debate. And that's essentially what it is. It's not a conversation. It's not a debate. It's not people addressing arguments and countering them or trying to arrive at the truth together. It's simply talking points and ad hominem attacks and that sort of thing. So it highlights exactly how divisive and hopeless our society is right now in terms of having any kind of dialogue going forward.
Yeah, you have the prime minister who praised Castro. You have Singh who praised Castro. You have people who act like Castro. You have conservatives that are basically liberals. And then you got the People's Party, which is pushing what I believe to be in many cases almost communist land ownership rules. And obviously there's a history there. We could go into all that. But first I wanted to say Canadian politics seems to me like Groundhog Day. And you kind of alluded to it a little bit there. It seems like every election people forget about the previous election and repeat the same old nonsense. You always hear the same sentiments. That guy or woman sounds like they'd be a good person to get a beer with, or that politician seems really down to earth. I mean, all they seem to have to do is wear plaid to a town hall event and suddenly they're down to earth. Imagine the litmus test. So what do you think the average person bases their political options or identities on as someone who has been assessing these issues for a long time?
No, you're completely right. It comes down to who they like the most, who they would have a beer with, and who sounds the most reasonable to them, right? And, you know, I experience this myself. I get a lot of support when I go out and speak in public. And it's not because people understand libertarianism or accept it. In fact, I think most of them, but you know, most of the people that come up afterwards and said, "Man, that was great. I love you, and you presented yourself very well. I'd love to throw my support behind you this election." Most of those people, I suspect, would be horrified if I were to say something. If I were to lay out exactly the ramifications of the libertarian principles means less government. You know, I was at Yuck Yucks about a week ago getting roasted by a comedian, and I simply roasted him back. It wasn't a political speech. But I probably got more support at that event than any political event I was at, because people love me, right? They found out I was a firefighter. I was pretty funny on that stage. I killed, and I was very relatable to them. And you know, unanimously, people were coming up and saying, "Man, I would love to support you this election stuff." Now, once they find out my actual policies, that might be a different story. But that's how most average Joes, and you know, even in the debate, my wife is totally apolitical. Like, I don't even think she totally understands what libertarianism is, or, you know, she kind of shrugs and says, "Well, you go do you, babe. I support you, whatever it is." You know, it's kind of like if my hobby were flying model airplanes or something like that. Yeah, you go do that. I support you 100%. You know, that's kind of how I think she looks at this to some degree. But she was listening to the debate a little bit in the background, and she heard Singh speaking, and she, like I think most Canadians, you know, if you base it on the Twitter feeds and everything afterwards, they're like, "Oh, that Singh guy actually sounds pretty reasonable. He sounds She's like, I think I like that guy the most. And I'm like, I'm kind of like biting my tongue. 2 minutes later, Singh said something about we have to increase welfare for people who don't have jobs. And she was letting out expletives like "F that guy." Why can't these people get jobs? Why do I got to support them? And he was no longer her favorite candidate. But most people are just getting that initial impression. Is this a good guy? Is this someone I could get a beer with? Is this someone I can trust? And that's enough for them.
It's a fair weather thing. And I mean, we remember Bill Clinton playing the saxophone on TV was a big part of leading to him winning, Obama going on SNL, Donald Trump, of course, getting roasted as well. I mean, it just seems like it's a popularity contest. It turns into a reality show after a while. I mean, with the most recent election, I can't help but think of how much everyone hated Harper at the end of his administration, of his term as prime minister. People were plastering those signs on every stop sign: "Stop Harper, stop Harper." Everywhere you went, you just see "Stop Harper." And then Trudeau comes in and, oh, he's some nice, younger, progressive dude with nice hair and all that kind of stuff. And it's just like, well, what about him praising China's basic dictatorship? What about all of his crazy policies about centralizing everything to death? I mean, where have we seen that before? And it just seems like no one actually has any comprehension of what the person they're supporting is supporting themselves. I mean, Scheer is a great example of that too. He's far left in many, many respects, but so many conservatives seem to like him. I mean, what do you think?
No, well, you're absolutely right. It again comes down to, politics is not about arriving at a political philosophy through first principle rationality and evidence. It is all about how you choose which flavor of ice cream to eat, right? There's a gut preference that you have, and you hate the other flavors, and this flavor is the one that's always served you best, and so you support that flavor, even if that flavor really at the end of the day is still just ice cream. It's still just a cone of excrement. You're still gonna lick it because that's the least evil excrement that you could lick, or something like that.
Yeah. Seems like it's been going on since ancient Greece, and that's one way of looking at it for sure. Now, I have to get into this a bit regarding Trudeau, because you said that you believe Trudeau will win again, which would assume that there are an alarming number of mouth breathers out there. His approval rating has been falling like a rock. I mean, with all of the controversies hitting Trudeau, including the blackface controversy, the SNC Lavalin controversy, and the Trudeau groping controversy, among so many others, how can he possibly get around this? Anyone that's not on the far left would have been hung in a public square by now for these things.
Yeah, well, his support is certainly falling in popularity, but of course we don't elect based on popularity. We elect prime minister based on how many seats his party wins, and so he's leading. He's still got a substantial lead in a number of ridings that they're ahead in, right? And so that's all he needs to win. And so, yeah, you're right. Among kind of undecideds or independents or people that are not quite sure which way to go, his approval is certainly falling. He certainly isn't doing himself any favors. But there's a lot of liberal strongholds out there, and much as they might not love Trudeau anymore, the glean is off the shiny pony. They hate everyone else more, right? And it's the same with conservatives. And I found this out in previous elections I ran in. People like social conservatives backed me over the red Tory in the candidate. They went door to door to me. They put up signs. They worked hard, and I had an army of volunteers who were all conservatives and social conservatives who liked me more than they liked the red Tory. But at the end of the day, they all called me up and said, much as we love you, Tim, we have to vote against our worst fear. We can't risk Trudeau getting elected. And so we're going to hold our nose and vote for our conservative guy. And that, I think this is what's happening with Liberals, and why they're leading why they're ahead in terms of riding counts, is that the diehard Liberals, as much as they don't like Trudeau being their front man right now, he's the lesser of the evils. They can't stand Scheer or conservatism. The media is against conservatism. And the other loonies on the left are a bridge too far for them. And so they're going to vote for the person who has the best chance of preventing their worst nightmare from coming true, and that's having a conservative government. And so I think that's what's happening on the political stage. But I could be wrong. Maybe enough liberals will be turned off by Trudeau that we get Scheer in there. But history in Canada has demonstrated that Canadians go in 8-year election cycles. I can't remember the last time there was a 4-year cycle where the government changed after 4 years. And so I suspect that that we'll see Trudeau win again. And and then I've heard from some conservative insiders, people that used to work for Harper and that spent some time inside conservatism, that there's a conspiracy theory out there amongst some of these people that Harper is waiting in the wings, that he's setting himself up, and that when Scheer doesn't win, he'll swoop in as a savior and he'll be our next prime minister after this next election cycle. But who knows if that will come true or not.
Yeah, I think he's enjoying being an analyst on American television lately. And I mean, it just blows my mind overall. I mean, I've never seen a prime minister so unpopular, even Harper. I don't remember. I mean, people just, I'm in Las Vegas right now. I'm in the United States, and almost everyone I talk to just laughs when Trudeau's name is brought up. I mean, he's a running joke. No one takes a guy seriously. He's just a clown to most people. And in Canada, it just makes people sick as opposed to as much of a joke. Obviously, he's a joke there too, but it just seems like everyone in Canada, for the most part, that you bump into, if you mention Trudeau's name, they just shake their head and sigh like, that guy. I mean, it's so over the top. I've never seen anyone so popular in power in Canada. Yet, all the same, as you mentioned, it looks like there's a very good chance that he's going to get his seats back. So I don't know. I mean, what does that tell you about the way people react to controversies? I mean, again, if say Harper, and I hate to say, if the other guy, but if Harper were to have been caught wearing blackface, I mean, I don't even care so much that he did it. It's just, first of all, I don't know who gets caught in 4 blackface photos, but anyway, the point is, if Harper did that, it would have caused like this crazy outrage, and there would have been lynch mobs outside of, Parliament Hill. So, I mean, what do you think this says about the average person's take on these controversies? Obviously, the left doesn't seem to care that much about blackface when it comes to getting their own seats.
Yeah, well, I think it shows two things. One is that the left isn't immune from the tribalism that they accuse the right of, right? And you'll notice that down south, Trump's approval ratings aren't that high either. He's embroiled in a lot of controversies, and yet there's a diehard base there that will continue to support Trump, not necessarily because they love everything that he's doing, but because he represents their best chance at not having a loony Democrat take the reins of power. And I think that the left looks at Trudeau the same way. Like they're willing to forgive him these things or look past them because they as much as it's distasteful or whatever, they wish it wasn't happening to their guy. They just can't stand the right as much. And now the difference is, the right doesn't make as big a noise about these things. Like they're not as into virtue signaling and protesting and raising a stink about these things as the left. And so in the media and in culture in general, you're not going to hear as big an outcry when a leftist does it. But so there's a bit of a double standard there. But at the end of the day, both sides are tribal and both sides are voting against their worst nightmare and supporting their best chance at having their worst nightmare come true. And that's, I think, what explains this.
Yeah, I think both sides take out the guns the second that it benefits their viewpoint, and then turn the other way when it doesn't. That seems to be so much the case in politics, and you see that in the United States with Joe Biden, grabbing young girls, and it's really creepy. But then if like a Republican did it, those same Republicans that are calling out Joe Biden, rightly so, calling out Joe Biden, suddenly don't care, and the left starts calling them out and not calling out Biden. It goes back and forth like that.
Absolutely. And it's ridiculous. I mean, as a libertarian, we kind of are a third party here observing this insanity on both sides. And, Trudeau, conservatives even give him a little bit of leeway. They're like, well, that blackface, that doesn't mean he's a racist, right? That like everyone does stupid stuff. And they're trying to abide by the principles that they apply to their people by giving him a pass on that stuff. The left would never do that. They would never, they uphold their double standard all the way, right? Which is kind of ridiculous. But I've said for ever since Trudeau got elected and was making all these virtue signals that I believe he's a racist, misogynistic frat boy, you know, and he's just living his best life right now. You know, he's continually like, you just have to observe Trudeau for like a minute to realize that if he comes to your door courting your daughters, you meet him with a shotgun and run him off your property. He's not the kind of guy that you would ever want to expose your daughters to. And, you know, he does the same thing. He's a racist in the same way. You know, racism on the right looks like you judge people, put them into categories, and judge them by their immutable characteristics. You separate them into race, gender, sexual preference, or whatever, and then you say, I don't trust you. I want you out. I don't want you near me. And they put up walls against these people, maybe. But the left does the exact same thing. But to me, it's even more insidious. The left separates and categorizes people based on their immutable characteristics, puts them into race, gender, sexual preference. But then instead of saying, we don't trust you, what they say is, we look at you like your children, like you have no agency, and like your poor, pathetic little things that require me to come in there and save you. They become essentially objects to feed the ego of these liberal elitists. And that's been Trudeau all along. And I can't understand why more people don't see this nakedly, right? You know, he elects gender balances cabinet. And what he's saying is, based on your genitalia, we're going to give you jobs. Well, I would never want to be given a job based on my genitalia. I'd want to be given my job based on my competence, on what I've actually done. I want to be judged by the content of my character, not by my genitalia or the color of my skin. And the fact that people see him as anti-racist or something like that, or some sort of hero of minorities is appalling to me.
Well, to that point, Tim, I mean, we can't forget that Justin Trudeau has technically fired and silenced more women in Ottawa as prime minister than any previous prime minister that we know of so far, considering the SNC-Lavalin scandals. He's fired a lot of women. So where's the virtue signal go?
What do you do with naughty children? I mean, you put them on timeout, so you punish them, right? And that's how he views these people. They're children. He's the father at the end of the day. He's the boss. And if they're not serving his agenda, if they're not feeding his ego, well, then they're being naughty and must be punished. I mean, I don't know why more people don't see this.
Yeah, and I mean, again, people generally view government as mom and dad as it is. So, I mean, they're already dependent on government, and they spend the majority of their childhood in a public school being taught by government. They spend more time with the school than they do with their own parents. They obviously are going to grow up to see the government as some kind of parent to them, or hopefully they rebel against their parents, the government. But with that said, it seems like a lot of these people are just school marms. When I listen to a lot of these speeches by them, it just seems like a kindergarten teacher talking down to the kids in the class, and it's really annoying, which is why I reject even watching most speeches anymore, because it's so demeaning to my own, mentality, to my own intelligence, to watch this person talk down to me like I'm a small child and they know what's best for me. And that's politics in a nutshell. But I have to go, you mentioned something that is important there. You mentioned third party earlier, and I can't help but go with, I can't go without mentioning Maxime Bernier, because, this is a confusing situation that's unraveling here, because in a lot of ways he'll share a lot of very libertarian principles. We've talked about this before, and he pushes forward very libertarian agendas in some ways, and he praises anarchist philosophers and stuff like that. But at the same time, we look at his record, we look at his belief in interventionism overseas, we see his ideas surrounding prohibition and all sorts of stuff, as well as immigration, which is heavy on the government property versus private property situation. I mean, do you see Maxime Bernier losing popularity? A lot of people seem to be kind of just looking at his own record and wondering, maybe this guy isn't as much of a libertarian as he originally claimed.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are disappointed and kind of disillusioned. You know, I can understand why why libertarians are throwing in support behind Bernier. I mean, heck, I invited him to be leader of the party. I had hopes for him to be Canada's Ron Paul, a guy that has an actual seat in government, who will say the things I want him to say and rail against the state and cry about or you know, preach about ending foreign intervention and ending the drug war and smashing the central banks and ending the CRA. That's what the guy I wanted. And that's the guy I hoped Bernier would be, based on, you're right, the fact that he had praised very hardcore libertarian philosophers and Austrian economists and that sort of thing. But you know, I realize now that maybe I've been hoodwinked, and I think a lot of libertarians are feeling the same way. You know, past behavior predicts future behavior. That's an HR maxim. That's why we do behavioral descriptive interviews to determine how people have behaved and what they learned from it, because that's going to be the best predictor of future behavior. And you're right. I mean, the one moment that kind of made me laugh in the debate was when Bernier attacked Scheer, saying, "How can you call yourself a conservative?" And Scheer came back with, "Which Max Bernier am I speaking to right now? Was it the 90s Bernier, who was a separatist? Was it the cabinet minister who was in charge of supply management? You know, is it the guy who voted establishment status quo conservative right down the line for 2.5 terms in Parliament?" And Scheer had a good point there. You know, one of the reasons why I think maybe the merger between the Libertarian Party and the PPC didn't happen is that I wanted to challenge Max for leadership. And it wasn't because I thought I was going to win, but I thought he needed to atone for his or at least explain his voting record. Like, you know, I've seen comments on Facebook. Anytime I highlight how our party is different than the PPC, I get PPC supporters coming out saying Max is Canada's Ron Paul. And I'm like, in what way? Is he coming out swinging against foreign intervention? No, his policy is fight them over there before they come over here. That's just standard foreign intervention policy of the status quo, right? Is he coming out swinging against the drug war? No. Is he coming out swinging against central banks? No. Is he talking about ending the CRA? No, he's not doing any of those things that libertarians care about. So how is he Ron Paul? And then they make excuses for him, saying, well, the vote is whipped. You have to understand how Parliament works. I get it. He'd be out on his ass probably if he didn't vote the way the establishment wanted. But listen, could you imagine Ron Paul ever voting for any of those things? For bombing Libya, for ending, for prohibiting gay marriage, for ramping up the drug war, for crony capitalism? Like, Ron Paul would rather lose his seat than vote for those things. And in fact, they tried to whip Paul, right? You remember the Republican establishment came after him a number of times and tried to get his congressional seat in primaries. Put a lot of money in there, and Ron Paul was able to defend them off and remain principled, and that it was a miracle that he was able to do that. But he refused to cave, even when it looked like he was going to lose his seat and be kicked out of government. And that's the kind of moral courage I want to see in a guy like Max Bernier, who has all this thing. And because he's not able to do that, well, the Libertarian Party is here to do that. So yeah, you're right. And the thing I've realized is that ultimately, at the end of the day, Bernier is doing what a practical politician needs to do to get votes, right? And to maintain power and get support and all that kind of thing. That's why he was a separatist in the 90s. That's why he was a status quo conservative in the 2000s. That's why when he ran for leadership, he ran on a fairly libertarian platform. He established himself as a libertarian candidate because there was already a populist, that was Kelly Leach, and then there was the centrist, Andrew Scheer. And so he recognized his niche would be libertarian, and that's why he criticized Leach's policies that he now embraces, the values test and the hard cap on immigration. And then when he left the Conservatives, he established himself as a populist, because those are the most disenfranchised people that are likely to be the most politically motivated, give him the most votes and support. And that though he's doing all the right things if your job is to get votes. But to me, they're all the wrong things if what you want to do is shift culture and connect people with the philosophy of liberty. You can't be a continual shapeshifter like that. And so that's where I think the difference is. But I will say this, a positive thing about this is that the fact that he he almost won leadership of the Conservative Party, running as the Libertarian guy, tells you that those of us in the Libertarian movement are doing our jobs of shifting culture. And, you know, to the degree that his party has some libertarian light policies, is the degree to which we're having some success. And so, yes, we need to shift culture. And by shifting culture, the politicians that come behind us that we blaze a trail for can start to adopt our policies. And to me, a metric of success is the fact that the PPC and hopefully eventually the Conservatives and hopefully eventually all the other parties have to adopt some of these policies in the same way that you see Elizabeth May on that debate stage pulling everyone towards climate action, right? And even the Conservatives now have to have a climate action policy, even though I know they don't want to. So it's the Greens that are driving this climate action. It's the radicals that create cultural change, and that those changes then migrate to government eventually. And so you know, that's what we want. But yeah, I'm really disappointed, and I think a lot of libertarians are disappointed that Max isn't the radical we wanted him to be, and that he's just amplifying culture and reflecting it rather than trying to shift it. And we are seeing a lot of libertarians come back and get distracted. You know, libertarians are like Charlie Brown and conservatives are like Lucy, and the conservatives continually hold this football out for us, and it's super tempting to think that we're going to get to play the game and kick the ball. We always end up lying on our backs looking up at stars, and Lucy kind of smirking, right? And this happens to us over and over again. I'm hopefully one of these election cycles will learn, you know, the Reforms Party let us down, the Conservative Party let us down. You remember Stephen Harper was touted as a libertarian, and all these libertarians migrated there. And then it would cut to a few years later when he's denouncing libertarians at a Manning conference. You know, this is no different. It's because of this difference in political theory. One says change happens from the top down, that we need to get into legislation. But my thinking is, and I think the reality reflects this, change is occurring from the bottom up. It happens in culture, happens with the individual, and then there's a political market demand, and politicians meet that demand. Well, we have to change the political market demand, and that means sacrificing all the votes if necessary to shift culture.
Yeah, it says a lot about the state of people in general worldwide when so many politicians on the left and the right run as somewhat watered-down versions of libertarians in order to gain popularity. George W. Bush was anti-interventionism. Obama was anti-Monsanto, and all these different things that a lot of libertarians identified with at the time, including anti-interventionism as well. Donald Trump ran on being a non-interventionist. Stephen Harper ran on being non-interventionist and more of a free market, type economist. And I mean, this always seems to be the way. Of course, Trudeau with non-interventionist again, and legalizing cannabis and all these kinds of things that are attractive in a lot of ways to certain libertarians. Tulsi Gabbard in the United States and Andrew Yang as well, but far left, but they run on many libertarian ideas that help them gain votes from libertarians. So I think we have to stop falling for it, for one. But secondly, you mentioned Ron Paul, and we have to remember Dr. Paul was Dr. No. Well, it seems to me like Maxime Bernier is Mr. Yes, I'll do anything as long as I can keep my political career and get a nice big welfare paycheck. But anyway, I want to move on to another subject, Tim, because Canada is facing down a recession. Not that one can blame Trudeau for that, but the Bank of Canada has done a bang-up job of its continued destruction of the Canadian economy. What can literally any of the candidates vying for popularity do about that? And what are your thoughts on the worsening economic conditions in Canada? What can it be chalked up to?
Yeah, well, I think if you want votes, you have to meet the political market demand, right? And people will not want the interest rates raised in the central bank, because that means their cycle of consuming everything and getting cheap loans and credit is going to mean they're going to have to go through a bit of austerity. Before we get back to some sanity. So I don't think politicians can do anything, but yeah, the central bank is driving this, right? It's this idea that you can centrally manage the money supply in the economy, ultimately that is driving this recession. And, these artificially low interest rates create bubbles. They create, people are consuming rather than saving, investing, and producing. They're consuming, and that, it's just like running up the credit card debt at your house. Eventually it's unsustainable, and the creditors come knocking, or they downgrade your credit rating or whatever if you can't pay, and you get what we get, right? You can't consume forever. At some point, you have to actually produce something of value for the economy. So that's what's happening, and this is why, you know, our policy is our platform calls for an end to central banking, to pay off the national debt by selling off crown corporations like the CBC. To you know, Canadians are in terms of debt and unfunded liabilities, that total for Canadians is about $4.2 trillion if you look at all levels of government. And the half of that at the federal comes at the federal level from CPP, old age security, and Medicare, and then the rest is the debt. So $2 trillion of that is federal government responsibility. So we can move away from CPP, we can move away from old age security and Medicare, and the market can provide those things, and then we can deal with these unfunded liabilities. Of course, that's not a very popular message because people don't want to lose their pension. But the problem is, they're going to lose their pension, they're going to lose their Medicare, they're going to lose any kind of security they have anyways, because right now we have one giant single point of failure, and that is centrally managed economy and safety net. And that safety net is getting more and more strained, and eventually it's going to break, and we're all going to be screwed. And so it's going to be gone anyway. So we need to do something now. We need to make some sacrifices right now, or that, you know, everyone's going to feel the pain.
Yeah, I mean, watch people wake up when they realize that they aren't getting their pension. I mean, the Canadian Ponzi plan or pension plan or whatever you want to call it, worldwide, the shortfall is expected to hit as much as $400 trillion by the year 2050. Now, imagine that when the average person born in 2007 is set to live to the age of 103. Then you have something that's so unbelievably unsustainable that you're going to see torches in the streets, or whatever the new modern digital version of torches in the streets is, when that all comes down, and it will come down. So, I mean, that's going to get people's attention pretty hardcore when they realize, oh, all that money that the banks and government have been saving up for me, it's gone. It's like that South Park episode, and it's gone.
Yeah, well, and that's right. And you know, that $4.2 trillion in debt and unfunded liabilities amounts to $270,000 per Canadian. And, you know, where are we going to come up with that money? Do you have 270 grand lying around? I know I don't. So how do we get that? How do we pay that down? You know, we're lucky if we can make the interest payments on that. And so it's you know, the math is going to catch up with us. Reality is going to catch up with us eventually. And this fantasy that we can use government to provide for our security and our safety, it's going to come crashing down, and there's going to be a lot of hardship and suffering because of it.
Yeah, it says a lot about dependence of the masses. Again, people, instead of saving up for themselves, look for other entities to save up for them. And it's pretty bad when you depend on government and banks to save money for you, because then you're dependent to these entities that are dependent on the dependence of the populace. So that's not going to end well for people. But again, $400 trillion shortfall by 2050. That's so over the top. That's over 4 times the global GDP. But anyway, moving on, finally, Tim, you know how I feel about voting. Honestly, after a while, I just feel like it's, you know, Ralph Wiggum going, I'm helping, after thousands of years. But I know you differ from me on this, especially when it comes down to, you know, getting seats for the Libertarian Party in Canada. Can you go into why you think that it's effective to vote for the Libertarian Party instead of what some people would do is disobey or not comply with voting?
Yeah, well, I think voting or not voting has about the same effect. So I don't think either is super helpful. You know, but I will say that voting Libertarian helps a little bit, in the same way that, you know, sending a donation to World Alternative Media helps a bit, right? It helps you get the message out a bit more. So voting helps us get the message. So to me, it's not about us winning a seat. I don't imagine, if we're doing our job properly, we'll never win a seat in Parliament, because we'll always be pushing the Overton window and saying the unpopular things that need to be said to keep shifting that Overton window. But what a vote does is it gives it puts us into the media a bit more. It gets us a bit more awareness. It gets people looking at us. Just, if we were able to say get 10% in a riding, that's a significant amount. Even the 1 or 2% that we do get is sending signals to other parties. We just having us on that stage is sending signals. So to me, it's kind of like giving a monetary donation. And actually, a lot of libertarians, it's funny, they're happy to give us a $400 donation because they love us getting our message out there. But they won't go to the poll and vote for us because they think that's a bridge too far. But if that's the case, Josh, I'll take $400 rather than your vote any day, because that definitely helps us buy more ads and get out there more. But your vote can help too. And like I said, it's just sending that political market signal that there are people out there that embrace this philosophy, and it sends a signal to the other parties that, hey, we have to pay attention to this platform and maybe adjust our thinking here. And so that's I guess my pitch for voting. At the end of the day, it doesn't hurt my feelings if people are principled enough to or feel like voting just encourages them. I totally understand that. 6 months before I was asking for votes for prime minister, I wrote an article explaining why voting might be borderline immoral. So I certainly was there once, and I don't think I even have a libertarian candidate in my riding, so I'm not going to be voting. I'm running in a riding that I'm not in right now because I just have more support and helpers there. But so I don't blame you for not voting, and I totally understand it, but you send us your money anyways, and we can use it to buy Facebook ads and get this out there. People are looking at that stage, and they're looking at political parties, like whether we like it or not, for political messaging. And so it's like going into a radical mosque, being invited to speak there. Well, I think it's good to take them up on their offer and create some cognitive dissonance and push back on the message that they're preaching there. And this is a giant cathedral. It's the cult of statism, and they're inviting essentially an atheist to speak on that platform and explain why their religion is BS and why and to appeal to some semblance of sanity and rationality and ask people to disabuse their cult.
Well, we should all be trying to combat our viewpoints with alternative viewpoints. And I think that is what Ron Paul has gotten in a lot of trouble for in the past, for example, is he will speak at a Freemasonic lodge, and then he'll go speak at some anti-Semitic event, but then he'll go speak at a pro-Jewish people's event and everything. And people freak out from either side. Oh, he's talking to Jewish people. Oh, he's talking against Jewish people. Oh, he's talking at a Masonic lodge. And it's like he's just talking to everyone. He's speaking at the Litecoin Summit in Las Vegas in about a week or so. And I'm pretty sure he's not a fan of Litecoin, but he's speaking there. And I mean, that's the thing. It's libertarianism and anarchism is about spreading a message. It's about marketing yourself and marketing your message and your idea. So with that said, there has to be stunts involved as well. So my final question then to you, Tim, is any chance you're going to get into a boxing ring with Justin Trudeau anytime soon?
Well, I mean, the guy dodged me the last time I tried that. I don't expect he'll be in there, but I agree with you. It's the stunts that we're trying anything. I really wanted someone to legally change their name to Justin Trudeau, run against him on the Libertarian Party ticket in his riding. That didn't happen. The Rhino Party copied us and are running a Maxime Bernier against him in his riding. So, that's why I did the roast battle. And I would love it if there's any boxing promoters out there that want to set up a charity match. I'll give it another go. We'll see if we can pull him out of retirement. I've seen a lot of pictures of him in boxing gear lately. Can't hurt to try, right?
I see him in a lot of different costumes. I don't know half the time whether he actually is a prime minister or he's just going around dressing as East Indians and in blackface and in karate outfits. I don't even get it, but
It's
Anyway.
perpetual Halloween for him.
Yeah, he's having a good time dressing up in his costumes. I don't know. This is why I actually don't think he actually sets any policies. He's just so
No,
ridiculous.
you know what? At the end of the day, I can't even be mad at the kid. He's a perpetual frat boy living his best life. The people who are responsible for him being there are the Canadian people. I mean, it's your neighbors. It's the people that look at that, go, oh yeah, that's what we want to lead us. That's what concerns me more than Justin Trudeau. It's my neighbors that are seeing this guy as the paragon of who should be leading this country. So that's what I focus on.
Well, he reminds me of the guy from Mad TV from years ago who just keep telling people, look what I can do, and he'd like stand on his hands or something. But it's absurd. Politics is absurd in general, and that's how we're gonna end it off, I guess, today. But just one last thing: where can people get involved, help you out, help you in the work that you do, and find more of your work?
Yeah, well, I would highly recommend you go to libertarian.ca. You can join our party. You can be part of this group of people fighting the state. I recommend you check out our platform. I'm really proud of our platform this year. It is a pretty principled, radical platform. We have a really good section there on marriage and family and explain how the state is ruining marriage and family, and how if we get government out of this sacred institution, we can bring back some sanity to society and to that important institution, marriage, family.
Mm-hmm.
We also, I like our foreign policy this year. I put in a kind of a controversial one called chicken hawk legislation, which requires that any politician voting for military action or war at first submit themselves to fight on the front lines, or physically incapable to submit a good chunk of their personal wealth and assets to fund the war effort, because I think that would be a good measure of whether politicians really support a war or not. If you're willing to fight, if you think our nation is in jeopardy, if you think your family's in jeopardy, who wouldn't stand up to fight for that? And if it's not that, I can't imagine too many politicians going and fighting in Iraq or Syria or any of these places where people are sending our troops now. So I think it's a great platform, and I highly recommend people go there and check it out. You can follow me on Twitter at Moen_Tim, and just check me out on social media.
Excellent. And, it isn't that controversial to think of politicians fighting on the battlefield. They used to. And I mean, it used to be that if a king didn't go fight on the battlefield, their people would overthrow him when the battle was done. So, I mean, it's not all that crazy. And I think it would definitely change the voting records among a lot of these war hawk politicians if that were the case. But anyway, I really appreciate you joining us, Tim. As always, we have to get you back on here soon again. And I appreciate it. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks for all you do.
Like what you see here at Wham, don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We cannot do it without you guys. Every donation is extremely, extremely appreciated, as we're getting incredibly shadow banned. We've lost 80% of our audience since January of 2019 and counting. They are ripping us apart here on YouTube, and the only thing we could do in the meantime as we prepare for the next big step is to ask for help from the viewers that support our free information that we try to post on a daily basis. You can also find us on Subscribestar, where just $1 a month, that's all it takes, $1 a month is all it takes to truly make a huge difference. If everyone gave $1 a month, it would change everything for independent media, and we could win this information war, and we can defeat the mainstream medias eventually. And of course, on Subscribestar, we post subscriber-only content that you'll only see on Subscribestar. So make sure to pledge there, become a patron. That makes a huge difference, guys. And also, don't forget to check out our Bitcoin address below in the comments and description, as well as on the screen for you to scan, if you please. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on the alternatives. We will likely be deleted by YouTube in the next 2 years. It's already happening on a vast scale, so make sure to find us on float.app. That's flote.app. at Josh Sigurdson, as well as at Wham, W-A-M. Float.app is replacing every social media, and I mean, it's just incredible the opportunities it provides for not just creators, but for the average person who wants to get away from these nannies telling them what they can or cannot see. They plan to replace Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, Tumblr, Reddit, and Patreon. You could subscribe to us on Float and Pledge with cryptocurrency. It's really innovative. We are also on BitChute at World Alternative Media, as well as so many others, Minds, PocketNet. You can find us at World Alternative Media on Instagram. There's many options. And finally, don't forget to join us at Anarchapulco 2020, the famous event, the best liberty event known to mankind, other than perhaps Anarcho Vegas 2020. There are two major events coming up that we are extremely excited about, and you can use promo code WHAM, that's WAM, and save 10% on your tickets to these legendary conferences. There's so many amazing people speaking there. You won't want to miss it. So make sure to support in any way you can, even if it's just sharing our videos, pressing like, pressing to be notified. Anything helps, folks. You are the change you wish to see. Thanks for watching, everyone. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.